I think if OG stays healthy, literally anything's in play. So yeah, Shwin, your overall kind of expectations, any projections you have?
I had to look up this Moose tweet that Geoff.
It's hilarious.
He just said I have something to get off my chest. Now that Randall is gone, and then in all caps, I've been lying on this man's name all summer. I never had faith in him. I'm sorry. It was all a lie. Every good thing I said about him, I was lying. It was a really good tweet. It was funny. I somewhat agree with that.
This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host, XJ. As always, he is my brilliant co-host, Geoff. Today, we are previewing the New York Knicks 24-25 season. And to do it, we brought on two of the best Knicks content creators in the world, two returning guests, Shwin and Shaun. This is a dope crossover, I'm not going to lie. I can't wait to hear from both of your perspectives on everything that's happened in a very eventful offseason for the Knicks, and also what you're expecting from them this season. But first, I have to take care of some business first. Geoff, I can't wait to hear from our guests, but the thing that all of our listeners are tuning in for, how are you doing, Geoff? How are you feeling? 60% of our audience is tuned in to hear from Shwin and Shaun, but 40% just want to know how you're feeling, Geoff. Please tell us about your emotional state. What's going on?
I'm really excited. I can't even joke about it today. Super excited. Shwin and Shaun are my guys. Always excited to talk basketball with them. Hop on spaces with Shaun all the time. Shwin is like the reason anybody gives a shit what I have to say. I'd still have 20 followers and be ranting about Elfrid Payton if Shwin hadn't DM'd me and asked me to write for Strickland. So Shaun, I was in his DMs early on. He just encouraged me, said, if you make good content, you'll go. I always say it, Shwin, Shaun, and John from KFS, 3 different people who come from 3 different entities, and all 3 just didn't really care about anything but like encouraging me. So I'll always love doing content with them and always just, push anything they do. I appreciate them very much. I'm excited to do this episode.
Well, that was very touching, but you ruined my joke by giving a substantive answer. So I'm just going to segue right into the content right now. Let's start right at the top, recapping the offseason. Shaun, let's start from you. What are your kind of like high-level takeaways on a very eventful offseason for the Knicks? Sort of polarizing. We've heard a lot of different perspectives. The Knicks lost Isaiah Hartenstein, Julius Randle, Donte DiVincenzo, among others, and bring in Karl-Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges, among others. So, like, what's your big overarching takeaways from the offseason?
I think my biggest takeaway is that, like, this is new territory, Like, this is how you move as a contender. Like, there was a point in my life where if the Knicks were good and we got to the second round, I would just be like, hey, like, we're good, cool. Like, let's see what this team has. Even myself, like, I was thinking, okay. I mean, I think about the iteration of this team that I was trying to view 5 years out from now with, Quick and RJ and Randall and, everybody's gone. Like, I was the Quentin Grimes. I think he can be a 15-point per game scorer and everybody's gone. But we've built the team around Jalen, and it's been the most optimal way to do so. And they continue. Like, I feel like the Towns move was like a further confirmation that the entire strategy is what is the most optimal way to surround Jalen Brunson. And so the Mikal trade was crazy because I feel like truly I manifested it. On 2K, I made a My League, and I made the team. And for the first time ever when I used the Knicks, I didn't really make moves. Like, I didn't make moves. I didn't send. I used to have to send the first season to get a good pick and, try to build talent. You think I started the season with Tony Douglas starting point guard? It wasn't happening. So it's just like now I was able to use the team we already had. And the only move I made was I traded Bogey and 3 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges, and I rocked out. And so then I was in the playoffs with my league, and the notification came, and I was like, yo, there's no way this is really happening. Like, I did not think that, like, as much as I wanted it to happen, I didn't think the Nets would trade him to us. And so that was surreal. I remember I'll never forget that day. That was a great moment. And, we broke the internet again with Karl Towns now. We lost Hartenstein, which is unfortunate. I'm going to wish him the best. There's no sweat off my back for that one because it was literally financially impossible for us to keep him. I think, especially now with Karl Towns, I think that he's kind of like a super Hartenstein. Like, he has the skill set, but to a heightened extent. And I'm just really excited about this team. I'm really excited to see us playing 5 out. I'm really excited to see. I'm excited for Josh Hart. I hope he ends up starting at the 4. I think he deserves it. I think in the playoffs last year, Josh Hart was literally looking like a top 25 NBA player, and nobody can take that away from him. I saw it. I watched it. So I'm excited to see what this team has. Unfortunately, it's media day, and they can't even talk about the big move we made. So everybody's out there pretending they don't know who Karl Towns is. But I'm just really excited for the season. I'm glad to be in this position where, the RJ and Quick trade, December 30th changed my life, because the Randall trade would have hurt a lot more if that didn't happen. But I was able to kind of just let the emotions go and be like, hey, this is what the team is doing. This is what we got to do. Whatever iteration of the team we have is the iteration of the team we have. Let's keep it moving. So I just pray we stay healthy.
What I learned from that answer, Shaun, is that you're a better GM than Leon Rose, because you got Mikal Bridges for 3 picks, not 6.
See it.
I like a lot of what you said. I actually randomly was rewatching old Hot Hand Theory episodes last night, just one, which sounds very vain, but
it's not self-involved at all, Geoff.
Yeah, not at all. Actually, and I are working on this side project, which maybe we'll get into down the line. But I was just seeing old takes we had, and I went on this. Shockingly, I went on a rant about the Knicks and title expectations and how finally they have to act like a contender and they have to have the expectations of a contender. And I do believe that last year's team, if healthy, was a contender. But I love the point you made about how this is how you act as a contender, and this is the iteration of the team that truly has the expectations and needs to be held accountable to one with the expectations of this is a championship level team. And I thought that was a great point by you. Before we turn it over to Shwin, I just want to, I went on a pretty, we posted on Twitter yesterday. I believe that Deuce McBride should be the 5th starter. I think that the Knicks wing rotation is super light. I think it's their biggest weakness probably on the team right now. You mentioned you think Josh Hart should start as the nominal power forward. I think Mikal Bridges is best as a small forward. I think OG Anunoby is probably best as a smaller power forward. And I think Deuce McBride is best as a shooting guard off of a creator like Jalen Brunson. And most importantly, for anyone out there who's well, Josh Hart's still better than Deuce McBride, I think that with how Tibbs rotates, having Josh Hart as the backup wing lets him fill in for OG and Bridges and just makes that carousel a bit more natural. What do you think of that? Do you think there's merit to that, or do you just think that Hart is so much better than McBride that you'd rather he started and you just want to start the 5 best guys?
No, I mean, I am the leader of Juice Hive, honestly. So I agree with you, and that's the beauty of the situation we're in. We have the flexibility where either way we go, it's a good move. The only reason I think Hart is because I think that we have. I like the idea of surrounding Jalen Brunson with size, the 2 big wings and Mikal and OG. And then I feel with Karl Towns at the 5 and having OG, I feel we need the rebounding. That's my reason for having Josh Hart out there. I think the rebounding difference. I don't want us to take any short. I don't want us to have any shortcomings on the boards. But if it was Deuce, that makes the 5 out thing even more dangerous. I said the other day, I was Jalen Brunson is going to be coming off of Karl Towns pick and pop into an open paint surrounded by shooters and Josh Hart in parentheses. But now we could take away the parentheses of just Deuce out there. And it's just shooters, and the defense and the switchability of having Deuce and OG and Mikal is insane. So that's a great lineup, and I'm not against that at all. I just think that my only thing for Hart would be the rebounding and the fact that I think he would be. I feel if Josh Hart started, he could quite easily average 14, 12, and 5, which is kind of crazy.
I mean, that would be a really good season. I mean, your answer is very respectable. I do think that it's clear that Hart is a more valuable rebounder. And that lineup would be really good. As you alluded to, it's a good problem for the Knicks to have. Actually, I'm going to take your job a little bit here. Shwin, what were your thoughts on the offseason? What were some of your takeaways?
I would probably say I was more apprehensive about each one of their big acquisitions. Not that I'm I don't know. I think I see the logic and everything they've done. I don't think they're stupid moves. I don't think they're bad moves. But when you're, when you play the Game of Thrones, you gotta win. So they're being judged it's not we're not going to be sitting here celebrating if they get to the second round this season, and it's well, it's the first time the Knicks have won, a playoff series in 3 consecutive years since like 1996. Like, I don't think anybody's going to be very impressed by that or care about it. That's not what they're being judged on. So I think the best way to put it is I think this offseason clarified like that they no longer are satisfied with just like, we're being prudent and we're biding our time and we're going to wait and we're just like, playing the long game. Like, no, they're definitely viewing themselves in a contender. They've operated that way this offseason. And I would like to say, since me and Geoff have debated this going back since, I don't know, 1 year, 2 years ago, for many years, I've always maintained that Leon Rose would definitely be willing to trade Julius Randle. It just needed to be a trade that was worth doing. And clearly, to him, Karl-Anthony Towns is worth that. I have some concerns about this trade, not so much about the player swap. I actually like, as much as I like DiVincenzo, I also think there's something to be said about trading him at his peak value. And I would also say the fact that he had to be included for Minnesota to be enticed says something about how Julius Randle's value was viewed around the league. But I think, like, I don't know. Like, I think there's one thing that me and Geoff, I got to talk about this. Geoff talked with a lot of people going back to last season is like, once Randle was out for the year, and then you kind of had to do this Hartenstein at the 5 thing, and then obviously we played Hart at the 4, then OG comes back, he plays at the 4, but whatever. Once you're doing that, you see how the offense shifted, and it became a lot more. Obviously, Brunson had to carry a lot more of the workload, but it wasn't just like, 17 straight ISOs in a row. You had a lot of off-ball movement that they incorporated, a lot of Steph Curry-like actions with Hartenstein. I think getting Towns is pretty much a tell that what they saw from that, they liked and they believed in, and they wanted to get a supercharged version of it, as Shaun mentioned earlier. Like, Isaiah Hartenstein, really, really good player and somebody who is incredibly valuable to the Knicks, but God bless him, the man is nowhere near the offensive talent that Karl-Anthony Towns is. He does not have the scoring chops. He does not have the gravity. He doesn't have, I know he's a really good passer, but like, I think the kind of opportunities that a player that Towns can leverage out of pick and pops and pick and rolls and 2-man game with Jalen Brunson is on an entirely different level to somebody like Isaiah Hartenstein. And the more I kind of like have dug into it, I think he was kind of like, I don't want to say cast aside, but I think he was minimized over the last couple of years in Minnesota after they got Gobert, because he was effectively playing most of his minutes at the 4, which I think he's fully capable of. He's a good 4, but it doesn't allow him to kind of use the full breadth of his offensive talents. And because they were very committed to this 2-big strategy, even when he was on with Naz Reid, and yes, both of them are good shooters, Naz is a good shooter too, I don't think Naz Reid has, one, he doesn't have the gravity Karl-Anthony Towns does, and 2, like, as good as he is, he's just simply not in that caliber of offensive player. It wasn't the same thing as him being in a true 5-out look. And when you look at stuff like that, like, like last year, Karl-Anthony Towns, he scored points scored by screener per 100 pick set. He had the highest points scored by that, 18. Percentage of picks where he received the ball and tried to score, though, was only 13%. And he only set 791 picks last year. To give you an example, Joel Embiid, 880 picks. Porzingis, 954. Jokic, 964. AD, 1571. Miles Turner, 1163. Alperen Şengün, 1594. Nikola Vucevic, 2,371. God knows what the fuck the Bulls were doing. Bam, 1,119. Chet, 1052. Giannis, 865. Like, these are Wemby, 825. All of these guys outpaced him, even though he was the most efficient in his opportunities. I'm 1,000% sure the Knicks looked at all the highs, like how the Knicks offense evolved with Isaiah Hartenstein. They look at a guy like Towns, and yes, even on the surface, you can see kind of like, okay, there's a lot here to work with. He is this stretch big, and now we have this 5-out ability. Okay, but once you break it down to even a more granular level, it's like, okay, we think we can get more out of this guy just because we're going to use him in ways that leverage his skills more. And that part to me is probably where I've become I lean more on like, I think this ends up being a net positive trade for the Knicks. I have concerns about the defense. I have concerns about the team's overall kind of, I don't want to say depth because I think depth kind of can get overvalued a little bit. I'm guilty of that myself. But their ability to withstand injury and their injury risk. OG Anunoby is an injury risk. Karl-Anthony Towns has missed a pretty significant amount of time over the last few years. These are things to be concerned about. But if you get this team healthy into the playoffs, that top 7, I mean, I would even call it a top 8. I think Precious is going to have a good season. And I think this roster is now more suited to Precious having a good season. You get Mitch back, you make it 9. Like, this team can be a real problem, I think. And then you look at like some of the vet min signings that they made, right? Like campaign makes more sense now. A guy like Marcus Morris, who I'm pretty confident is going to end up being back here, like he makes more sense now. I'm not saying they're amazing signings. I'm talking about evaluating them as veteran minimum signings. Those look a lot more prudent and sharp now that the Knicks' depth has been depleted a little bit. So I'm kind of, I think like what they have done is very encouraging from the point of they seem to have had a vision. I think playing that Indiana series and Philly for that matter, playing against 2 teams that have that ability where, hey, our center can get out here and now you're spread out all over the floor. The Knicks defense was a mess in the playoffs. It was not good. It was not a good defensive performance for them. And I think part of that was eye-opening for them because they were like, wait, we have good defensive personnel. Why is our defense why is it so bad right now? And it's like, well, this is the stress that the ability to go 5 out can put on you. And also, while Karl-Anthony Towns I don't think he's quite the volume playmaker that Julius Randle is. I listened to what you talked about in terms of their passing on the podcast, XJ. The percentile thing was kind of crazy when you put the passing creation percentile difference was pretty crazy. I'm not sure. This doesn't match up with me logically when I watch them, mostly because I think there's something to be said of like the last version of Julius we saw where he's collapsing the paint and then he's just spraying out to corner 3 shooters constantly. I thought he was hitting a higher level of playmaking, but what I will say is that I think one of the frustrations we've always had with Julius is, yes, you can create him an advantage, but he can piss away that advantage because he's not a quick decision maker. I think Towns is a lot quicker of a decision maker when an advantage is created for him, be it I'm going to swing the ball, I'm going to shoot the ball, I'm going to drive, whatever it is, he's a lot quicker about his decisions. And very, very specifically, me and Geoff talked about this like for over a year. Julius Randle, for all his strengths as an offensive player, that man will not set a screen and roll to the rim or pop. Like he'll just set a screen and he'll just go like, all right, I'm at the elbow now. I'm mellow right now. Give me the ball. And that was always really frustrating because it meant that him and Brunson really didn't have like much of a 2-man game. The 2-man game they had was Brunson being such a good off-ball player that he was able to play off of Julius and capitalize. And this is a credit to Julius for sure, capitalize on the 3-point opportunities that were created for him. But they didn't have a 2-way relationship in that sense. Cat is so much more deadly in that scenario. And I think that cannot be understated. And that was again, like Anthony Edwards, I think he's going to be a great player. I don't think he's anywhere close to the offensive player that Jalen Brunson is right now. Not even close. And he this is the best offensive environment that Karl-Anthony Towns has been in. And I'd argue it's the best offensive environment that Mikal Bridges has been in. So you're talking about 2 guys who the Knicks obviously made big bets on that. I think part of those bets is you haven't even seen the best of these guys. We are going to get the best out of them. So, we just dropped a pod last night, early this morning, obviously talking about the trade. And Stacey had asked me, like, do you think that there's, can we unlock a higher level for Karl-Anthony Towns? I don't think he's going to become a better player in New York. I think we have the opportunity, though, to play more to his strengths, which will allow him to have a larger impact. And what he provides also, I think, can improve even the already superstar impact we've gotten from Jalen Brunson over the last 2 years.
I loved and agreed with a ton of what you just said, Shwin. I mean, I love the points about Brunson's synergy, the environment to optimize Cat and Bridges, all of that. The thing from a macro standpoint that stuck out to me the most was that, and maybe you could clarify this if you want, but you said the Knicks will be a problem, basically. And to me, the Knicks would be a problem doesn't mean the Knicks will be the top 2-3 contenders for an NBA title this year. Do you believe that? Because all the assets for the most part are cashed. And so that's really a question for all three of you based on the offseason. And we'll talk about specifics for moving forward to the regular season. But I'm just wondering, assets are all out for the most part. We got back what we got back. It's Karl-Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges. That was the offseason. Does that do enough to feel like it's a sufficient return for all the assets that went out?
Can I answer this with the Bill Simmons? Can I see it? Can I see it? Like, I just want to see it because I don't know. Like, I have an idea of how Tibbs is going to use this roster. We're 100% going to get we're going to get 5 out. Like, you can't make this trade without an inherent understanding that you're going to get 5 out with Cat. I want to see how and when they leverage that. Geoff, you might have been on the pod where we talked about this earlier this summer when there were, I think CP of Knicks Fan TV had first talked about, Knicks have interest in Karl-Anthony Towns. One of the things I was interested in with what if the Knicks did get Cat, what are the different ways he can help elevate your offense and your team in general? So the obvious one is obviously 5 out, Brunson, him and Brunson, that's going to be deadly. Yes, I think that's very, very clear. I don't even think we need to argue that. What I'm very interested in is the starting lineup. I think Precious is starting. That's what I think. I think Precious is going to start the season. What I am interested in though is when Brunson sits, my theory is that is when we'll get the first dose of Cat 5 out, because I think he wants to use that to buoy the offense when Brunson sits, which was a problem last year. The Knicks offense when Brunson sat was not good. Even when they had Julius healthy, you can look up those splits. They're not good. And then I think we will close 100. I think we're going to close games with Cat at the 5, but I'm very, very interested to see how he manages those things. If he manages them appropriately and the Knicks get relative health, then yeah, I think we're 100% a contender and I think we can beat Boston. Do I think Boston's a favorite over us? Yes. But that's not you can't not make a trade if you think it increases your chance at a championship because you might not be the ultimate favorite. That would be cowardly. You have to try to go for it, especially when you're as good as the Knicks are. And whether they succeed or not will ultimately determine, how we view these moves. But for years, they were criticized by fans too, which I always found weird, was oh, you're just walking this middle path. You can't, you're kicking the can down the road, which also just a dumb argument, never made sense. And it's well, now what are you going to say? Now it's well, I can't believe the Knicks did all this stuff. You can't have it all every which way you want. Personally, I am always going to be uncomfortable being as pick deficient as the Knicks are now. But you can't deny, again, you go down the list: Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Karl-Anthony Towns, Josh Hart, Deuce McBride, Precious Achiuwa, Mitchell Robinson when he gets back. That's a team that has a lot of quality players.
Don't forget Tyler.
Yeah, and that's a team that has a lot of quality, and then you have a lot of versatility within that. And I think to give Tibbs some credit, we always think about versatility in terms of the 5 out part of it, but you also do need the versatility to play big, to match up big at times. And when Mitch is back, I think you have 2 lineups that can be pretty devastating, in terms of the very obvious Cat at the 5-1, but also Cat with Mitch. That's a lineup that can create problems in its own right. Cat's a really good offensive rebounder, and obviously Mitch, we know what he can do on the offensive glass. You need depth, you need versatility, and you need to be able to attack teams in multiple ways. I think this team absolutely at full strength has the ability to attack teams in different ways and do it in a really, really devastating fashion. So yeah, to answer your question, do I have my concerns about it? And am I kind of can I see it? Yes, I am. But I think in theory, when you kind of play it out and just think about it, yeah, the Knicks are absolutely a contender. And look, the books are telling you they are. They immediately jumped up to, I think, the third best odds in the league to win the championship after the trade. So should tell you something.
Shaun, what do you think? Did the Knicks get enough back for all the assets that went out this offseason?
I think so, for sure. I mean, when you list the assets and you put them on paper, like somebody was like, oh, we traded this, and, 6 picks and all total and got this back. Just like, when you look at what we like, I would have traded another first round pick for Mikal Bridges. I don't care. I'd been saying for a while, I was like, yo, trade Mikal, go get Mikal, do 3 picks. I'll do 4 if that's the tax we got to pay for it being the Nets. The 5th one, hey, who cares? Like that, the 27th pick in 2027 is not something I'm concerned with right now. I want to win a chip. So I'm not sure about that. It hurt to lose Donte. But as I was saying to people, it hurt mainly for personal reasons. Just for like the, gelling of the team and, seeing a guy come here and, us get a good bargain contract and him exceed the role and watching him grow and become a different level of player. But unfortunately, that I think contributed to him being traded. I think that, he was like, hey, like I've shown that I can come here and be a 20-point per game scorer and, one of the best shooters in the NBA and play pretty solid defense. And you guys demoted me. But that's mitigated for me, that loss, by I'm so excited about Deuce McBride. I'm so excited about the opportunity it's going to open up for Deuce McBride, what we're going to see from him this year, the continued improvement. I'm excited about Tyler getting a chance to play. And so when you look at like what we're bringing into the season, I don't think, I don't bother counting what left, and that's what I was saying to people in the space. I was like, some people are coming on stage like, oh man, I just can't believe we didn't get to see Julie. And I'm like, yeah, it's very unfortunate we didn't get to see those January Knicks, but like they're gone now. So it's like, are we going to lament what we didn't get to see, or are we going to talk about what we have here? And so it's just like, was it expensive? Sure. But like, if you want the Louis bag, you got to pay the Louis price. So I'm not upset about that. I also wanted to say, man, I love you guys. I tell you guys this all the time. I tell Geoff this all the time in our conversations. This is my first time talking to Shwin in like out loud in person, not in person, but yo, the way you guys do the numbers and the stats is so crazy. He is running down the amount of screens that people set, bro. Like, I'm just like, yo, this is crazy. This is amazing. I love you guys for that. That is so crazy.
I didn't do the hard work. I just looked it up.
Yeah,
he's like,
I was sitting there and all with you, honestly.
Like,
it's really good data. And one thing that that Shwin alluded to in his when he was in his monologue about Towns, he talked about Towns at power forward versus Towns at center. And if you haven't listened to our most recent episode, actually I mentioned it. You might not realize just how good center Towns was. For those of you who remember Towns of the last few seasons playing power forward next to Gobert. So I just want to reiterate something that XJ said on our last episode. In Towns' last 5 seasons as a primary center for the Timberwolves, he was never lower than the 97th percentile in offensive impact for the Timberwolves. He was always one of the best players in the entire league on offense. In 2019, his peak, he was in the 99th percentile in both offensive impact and overall impact. He was an amazing all-NBA level player that sort of has, to Shwin's point, fell by the wayside since they acquired Gobert and went into a different direction. They didn't like what he lacked as a rim protector. And I think the Knicks think Tibbs can get a little more from him on the defensive end and then marry that with the high level of offensive impact that should sustain with him surrounded by more shooters. Shwin, you said another thing. We don't acknowledge starting Precious here on this podcast. We'll cross that bridge. We don't. That's not a thing. We're not Precious. If Towns gets hurt and Precious wants to start at center, go for it. That dude is switchable as hell.
I'm telling you, I think you're going to be a little disappointed. Just my hunch.
Disappointed is not the right word, Shwin. So
to be clear, I suggested that might happen too.
We will cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah. I genuinely, like, the one thing I'll say is, like, I'm just more interested in, like, the 48 minutes, because I think as long as we already know that Tibbs does not view, like, he needs to have his best 5 out there to start games. We have fucking like 4 years of evidence of this. Yeah. But I do think we have evidence that, like, whatever he thinks is the best 5, those 5 guys are going to be out there. like even at the end of the 2022-23 season, there were a lot of people that were really frustrated that RJ was still starting. But if you look at like how they closed games after the Josh Hart trade, it was basically always Brunson, Quickly, Hart, Randall, one of the centers. So like I think he has an idea of what his best five is, and then he will work a rotation to get there. So if the frustration of Precious starting ultimately comes with like we're gonna get Karl-Anthony Towns to play like the last 10 minutes of a game at the 5 with Brunson and all these guys, I will probably be able to get over it, and I will still tune in to listen to you get mad about it and laugh a little bit.
But that's just, I'm sorry, that's just so antithetical. That, like, you want to maximize your assets. You want to be the best version of the team you can be. I've never understood this acceptance with, well, the Knicks are better, or any team is better than we thought we'd be, so therefore it's okay that they're not optimizing their rotation. Look, if you're a Knicks fan out there and you're just so desperate for like anything good that I'm not going to take that away from you. But for me personally, I just will never be able to wrap my head around being okay with, well, yeah, the starting lineup very clearly isn't one of their best units, but hey, he got around to playing their best players together eventually. And your main point of, actually I talked about it last episode. We saw Tibbs start Jericho Sims because he wanted to keep Hartenstein with the bench unit. I very much agree that Tibbs doesn't always start his 5 best guys, and I'm actually okay with that. Not every team does start their 5 best guys. Sometimes there's positional overlap, and you don't want to, go small right away to start, whatever. I get that. But in this case, that's a reason to start Deuce, not Precious, because we know that Tibbs likes likes Josh Hart more than Deuce. We know that when it comes down to it, Tibbs is going to close games with Josh Hart over Deuce because correctly, he likes in those moments, he likes the things Josh Hart brings. But you start Deuce, who he thinks is worse than Josh Hart. That is the second best lineup you play. That is what you do. You don't play your 3rd or your 10th best lineup to start. That's so far removed from the ceiling of this team. You're immediately capping this team off by the knees.
I'm a little bit more. I think I'm not a little. I'm pretty bullish on Precious. I'm pretty bullish on what Precious can do with this team.
Yeah,
especially
at center, not at power forward.
I think he'll play center with Cat. Like if you go back and watch the Minnesota season, when he had Cat in Minnesota, what he did yeah, but he had Taj. If you look at those minutes, Taj, and people would complain about this all the time, but it was like their minutes together, Taj at the 5 was like they were like by far their best minutes. They were great together. And people would get upset because I think a lot of it had to do with like how they used Cat offensively at that time. Tibbs was still very much like not with the whole analytics wave necessarily. But like I don't anticipate it being the same. Like I think he's talked about it today in the media day where he talked about like he plans on switching more because he has personnel where like he needs to switch more. And I think as long as Precious is the 5 on defense or however you want to, parse those things together, I actually am like kind of intrigued by that unit. I don't know. I'm consistently pretty intrigued by Precious. And I also think Tibbs is really good at getting a lot out of his big men. I think I'm expecting Precious to vastly outperform his contract. I'll leave it at that.
I agree that I expect Precious to outperform his contract, and that I'm even like slightly bullish on Precious coming into the season as well. But if they make this trade to start Precious next time, we're gonna be pissed off. I'm gonna be exactly the face that Geoff made when you said it. Like I love the Josh Hart idea. I love the Deuce idea. The Precious idea, I do not love. I'm gonna shut up because at the end of the day, like, what can I do? But I won't be happy.
To be clear, I would agree.
I have these 5 out dreams. And you say, nah, not gonna do that. Got to start Precious. That's gonna piss me off.
I totally agree with the Deuce argument. I'm with you there. I'm just saying what I think is going to end up happening.
I think I would just chime in to say I think it's surprisingly, probably to most people, I think it's okay depending on what the matchup is. I don't think that should just be your typical starting 5 with Precious 4-5 with Cats. Like I just think it's like if it's the right matchup, if it's a situation where you're playing the Sixers, Denver, okay, cool. Let's ride with it. That's fine. But if you're just playing like a regular NBA team, if you're playing the Golden State Warriors on like a Tuesday night, I don't want to see Precious and Cat be the Knicks 4-5. So I think it's matchup contingent. I'm totally fine with it in the right spots personally.
But lineups that can thrive and are matchup dependent, you pull them out in those matchups in the middle of the game. Tibbs is a very habit-based person. if you say if he starts the season, first of all, we play Boston. God, I shouldn't say we. The Knicks play Boston to open the season. If he starts that lineup against Boston, who isn't he going to start that lineup first?
That's true.
Boston's the team you don't deploy that lineup first. So, yeah, again, we've already spent way too much time talking about this. This team is way too good to be starting Precious Achiuwa at power forward. Can't do it. And this isn't Precious hate. With Mitch out, I play him all the minutes you want at backup center. And I think he'll be good too. I think Shwin said I think he'll outperform his contract. But I think he'll underperform his contract if they play him at power forward, because that impact is dependent on role. We've talked about this a number of times on this podcast. You're so much in modern NBA of your impact is determined by how you're used by your team. And if Precious is used suboptimally, it's going to hurt his impact on his team. It's going to make him look worse than he actually is. And the tide is going to turn on him very quickly. I feel very strong. Well, maybe not, because the team's so good anyways. But in games like ones against Boston, it's going to be very, very loud how exposed he's going to get at that position, in my opinion.
Unless the videos of Precious shooting practice corner threes ends up coming to fruition and he starts hitting 36% of those. So
you're right though. But we shouldn't have to clarify that. That's one of the most annoying things. If Precious comes out and starts shooting threes, of course he's a viable power forward. All of my assumptions right now are assuming Precious is the guy we've seen who doesn't ever shoot.
Just covering all our bases, but let's talk about what we're looking forward to the most. Let's segue into that. We know that Shwin is looking forward to the most. Precious playing 35 minutes at the 4. That is totally a perfect paraphrase of what he said.
Precious and Sims.
Precious and Sims is the 4-5. But let's talk about what is something in the upcoming season, or if you want to give a hot take about something you think is going to happen, one or the other. What would you say, Shaun, as far as what you're looking forward to, or something you want to get out and say a bold take on?
So I'm definitely, I think, the point about, I think it was Geoff. No, it might've been Shwin. You guys both said really smart things right after each other. But, just the difference in the two-man game between Jalen and Cat and Jalen and Randall, in the way, so I think that's the two-man game between Jalen and Cat. I think it's going to be really, really great to see and really beneficial for both of them. The paint being open, please don't start Precious. 5 out, Jalen Brunson with an open paint. I just think back to the Maverick series against the Jazz, watching him come around and face Rudy Gobert with nobody behind him and just make him look stupid because Maxi Kleber was the stretch 5, so the paint was open. So, I really look forward to it. I think that can make Jalen, I already thought he'd be MVP, but now, whoa. And aside from that, because that's the basic answer, I'm really looking forward to, secondary creator Mikal Bridges. I'm looking forward to seeing, what he can do. Because I think when we traded for him, and as we all think of him, we all think of 3-and-D Mikal Bridges. I'm excited. Okay, he's going to do a great job on the wing. He's going to be a great defender. He's going to knock down shots. But I just think, especially now with Julius gone, I think Cat is option 2, but Mikal is probably our secondary creator now. And I want to see what he can do in that role with a team that doesn't suck, because he was when he was with the Suns, he was option 3 or 4. And then people started getting hurt and they were like, wait, this guy can kind of play make a little bit. And then he went to Brooklyn and he was option 1 and everybody sucked. And it was just wow, everything over here is terrible. So I want to see now a kind of balance between those two things of having a solid roster around him will also increase responsibility. And what are you going to do with that?
I love that you made that point, and I want to just segue that into a question for Shwin, because I think Shwin, people get annoyed when I come on Strickland. We just basically sit there and agree with each other or talk about how good Emmanuel Quickley was as a Knick. But I think one of the few and loudest disagreements we've ever had, and I think we still probably fundamentally disagree on some level, is does a team need 2 creators to succeed? We've talked about this a number of times. I think that was one of your main defenses of Randall not Randall being better than Towns in a vacuum, but for the Knicks specifically, you liked the idea of a second initiator to help Jalen Brunson out. On the last pod, and if you can't tell by now, people, XJ said a lot of smart things on the last pod. But on the last pod, XJ talked about how if Bridges is your second initiator, a lot of Knicks fans said that wouldn't be good enough. They need a better second initiator than Bridges. And XJ said, he doesn't need to be better than Randall was anymore because of the space Towns brings. He's going to be operating in a much easier environment to succeed than Randall was last season, when Randall was playing a lot of times with at least a center, but then sometimes maybe even a center and Josh Hart, which is not to
two centers.
Yeah, the opponents don't really treat him as a spacer. So Randle had Randle had to operate in a really tough environment as a second initiator. In that paradigm, you need a guy as good as Randle to create good offense. In this new paradigm, where the second initiator is going to be surrounded by Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby, and Karl-Anthony Towns, you maybe don't need a second initiator as good as Julius Randle. Maybe Mikal Bridges is enough. Do you think that's enough, Shwin, or do you think still we're going to get to the trade deadline and say, man, maybe the Knicks need a bench scorer who can just create offense when Jalen Brunson isn't the one creating offense?
No. So I actually think this is worth mentioning. So last year, Karl-Anthony Towns, he averaged 3.2, or sorry, this is for his career. Sorry. He averages 3.2 assists per game. Last year, Isaiah Hartenstein, who we were like, Jokic of the East, this guy is next level playmaker, 2.5 assists, I believe, off the top of my head. I'm not looking at his numbers right now, but I'm pretty sure. I'm sure that went up after, he moved to the starting lineup full time and Randle was out, whatever, blah, 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 blah. If you have somebody who can play off of the advantages Brunson creates and build off of them to the level that I believe Karl-Anthony Towns can, then I think you can get away with, oh my God, we don't have a second guy that can like break down the defense and create from a standstill. Do I think that there could still be instances where that's a problem? Yeah, I do. I mean, even with Boston, we've seen instances where like, yeah, they're 5 out, but the fact that Tatum, isn't good at basketball anymore, and that Jaylen Brown, his handle is much improved, but he's obviously kind of streaky sometimes too. Drew Holiday, not the greatest pure point guard, whatever you want to call it. Ditto for Derek White. There are times where that can rear its head and they bog down in end game offense type stuff. But like on the whole, the fact that they can go 5 out and whatever, like again, also not the greatest passing team, Boston, individually. But last year, if you watch them, you're like, wow, it kind of doesn't matter that they're not a great individual passing team because all this space makes all their reads easier. And it just opens up a lot of opportunities. So, yeah, I mean, I think with Karl-Anthony Towns here and now, and not just Karl-Anthony Towns, right, but in the context of like, we have Jalen Brunson, obviously. We have OG Anunoby. We have Mikal Bridges now. You have Deuce McBride, who can shoot the shit out of the ball. You have Josh Hart, who like the cool thing with Hart, and I really don't know if people have talked about this enough. The cool thing with Hart that you can do with Cat at the 5 now is you can have Hart act as the roll man, and he can do like his Draymond Light impression. I think that's a really, really interesting tactical option the Knicks have. If you want to preview what that could look like, go watch the Knicks Kings game last year at the Garden, where Hart absolutely destroyed them as the roll man. But like when you have these so it just opens up a lot, and I think it amplifies. Like I think that's the greatest thing or the big upshot of getting Cat. His skill set should amplify everything everybody else does, and if you can provide that, then I can live with, okay, this guy's not the greatest creator. I also think it's worth mentioning, like, if you break down all of Cat's minutes over like the last, I would just use the last 3 years because that's when Minnesota got good. You can break down all of them, with Anthony Edwards, with Gobert, with Naz Reid, or however you want to break down his lineups with Mike Conley. When he's on the floor by himself without a Mike Conley or without an Anthony Edwards, they still have relatively like, they're not a good offense, but they're okay. They're okay offensively. That has not been the case with Julius Randle. And that says something about kind of like just the pure value of what Cat can do. And it's why I think it's really key that Cat be on the floor at the 5 when Brunson sits as much as possible. Because I think that, you talked about winning over 48 minutes. Like that to me is how you really, really kind of artificially work through Jalen Brunson not being on. And to your point, the Knicks don't have another high level creator. I think that's how you work through that, is kind of, again, artificially using Cat to bump up the sliders offensively by playing him at the 5. So I don't know I think that answered your question, but yeah, I'm less worried about that now, given the entire context of the team. And I think a fair assumption that whether he plays enough at the 5 to satisfy you or whatever, he's going to definitely play at the 5.
Yeah. No, that was a great answer, honestly. And, I don't want to take the stage away from you because we did want you to answer the same question as Shaun did. So real quick, do you have a hot take or something you're looking forward to regarding the season?
I think that Deuce McBride will provide probably like 90% of what Donte DiVincenzo did.
That'd be really good.
That'd be amazing.
I am guessing that I feel really strongly that like part of their comfort in including DiVincenzo has to do with they think that there's a jump coming from Deuce McBride. I've been pretty bullish on Deuce. I thought he showed growth throughout last season as he got more minutes, which is normal, but also encouraging because a lot of it, I thought he really started playing at a higher level heading into the playoffs. And obviously in the first round of the playoffs, he was great. Kind of slowed down against Indiana. Wasn't a great series for him. But in that Sixers series, I mean, you can argue he was the most vital player in game 1 for sure. And really what should have been the closeout game in game 5. He was awesome down the stretch of that game. So, I mean, the fact that he's already shown, hey, I can deliver on the big stage, and you mentioned it, Geoff, like the fact that his best role is playing off of a guy like Jalen Brunson, that bodes well for him. And, I also, there's like small things I like in terms of he's been spending a lot of time with like Mikal Bridges this offseason. I think that's like one of those, it's a good sign for a young player to be kind of like developing some chemistry even off the court with somebody who's going to be a key player in your team. And I don't know, he just seems like that's what stood out to me towards the end of last year is he was like he was playing with a lot more confidence. I mean, you just saw anytime he had a shot, he was not hesitant to let it fly. And, obviously like any shooter, he had good and bad stretches, but continuing to shoot is the hallmark of what actually makes a good shooter. Not that no shooter. Steph Curry has months where he's like 26% from 3. Yeah. And you're like, is he ever going to make a 3 again? It's like, yeah, he's going to make a lot because he's Steph Curry. I'm not saying Deuce McBride is Steph Curry. I'm just saying as long as he keeps that mentality, I feel really, really good about what he can be.
Just a quick follow-up question for you before we get into the next segment. When you say he's going to approach DiVincenzo's impact, do you expect a leap from him defensively then? Like, because XJ and I have been talking about it all offseason. Deuce has, amongst Knicks fans, this reputation as this really good defender. He's a bull at the point of attack. But some of his defensive impact numbers don't actually reflect the reputation he has. But I think it's what's underlying when people talk about Deuce's defense is that the potential is clearly there. You see what he can do at the point of attack. You see how he navigates screens. Do you think that when you say he's going to approximate DiVincenzo's impact, that'll be made up for defensively, or do you expect the shooting to maintain and it to just be the full package on both ends?
I expect him to be better defensively for sure. I also and I know you guys aren't arguing this, I also just felt like I like DiVincenzo. I think he's a fine defensive cog. I never thought he was like this. I saw, even today, I read this piece from John Krasinski, who writes for The Athletic, but for the Wolves. He talked about you talk about turbocharging your defense. Donte is going to add a lot there. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? He's just he's not that level of defender. He got roasted throughout the playoffs, which is fine. So did Deuce. Whatever. I understand that I'm not. What he provided offensively made it very okay for him to not be some lockdown defender. But yeah, I think Deuce will take a leap on both ends of the floor. I felt I think the experience that he had guarding Max, you got to understand, this guy effectively for long parts of both series was charged with guarding high end primary guys, right? Tyrese Maxey and Tyrese Halliburton. That's not easy. And he at times performed really well, right? There were moments he had on Maxey where he was really good. There were moments he had on Halliburton. He was really good. Unfortunately, those guys are good and they're going to burn you too. That's just how it works. You can watch Drew Holiday is an amazing defender. I've seen Jalen Brunson drop 40 on his head multiple times. Does that mean Drew Holiday is not an elite defender? No, that's not what that means. Obviously, Deuce has a long way to go before he's Drew Holiday defensively. But yeah, I expect him to improve defensively, and I expect his offense to just continue to ascend because you could see the difference between when he first was starting to get minutes versus towards the end of the season. That comfort and that trust, right? So much of it is trust from your teammates of you know what? Oh, Deuce is open in the corner. I'm going to feed him because that's a great shot for us. When that confidence comes from your teammates, it helps you become more confident. I think, look, the organization now has shown a lot of confidence in it, right? One of the key reports, or not key report, but a report that came out right in as that trade, the Karl-Anthony Towns trade was getting reported, was that Deuce McBride was not part of these conversations. That to me indicates that's a level of confidence the organization is showing in you. They're basically saying no, we're not trading this guy. What I imagine, this is what I imagine. I imagine, it's look, we'll give in DiVincenzo. And it's Minnesota's all right, we need we need something else. Give us Deuce. And they were you can have the Detroit pick. You cannot have Deuce McBride. Again, that to me shows a level of confidence from the team in what he is and what he is going to be for them.
And, look at Deuce McBride's shooting numbers all 3 years in the league. Efficiency at the rim goes up every single season. Efficiency from the mid-range goes up every season. 3-point percentage goes up every season. This guy has shown a propensity to improve. Actually, we love Deuce, right? There's no.
Yeah, you got 4 huge Deuce fans here all together, so it's you're going to hear a lot of things just echoed. I will say, I do think Donte DiVincenzo is a solid defender. I don't think he's some elite perimeter guy, but he's a solid defender, grades out really, really well in a lot of metrics. For instance, in what B-Ball Index calls the off-ball chaser role on defense, he grades out it's 99th percentile in the NBA, which I think is pretty surprising. Had an 85th percentile matchup difficulty and still had an 83rd percentile grade for his perimeter isolation defense. Also generates a ton of steals. I think he gambles a lot and can make a lot of mistakes defensively and can sometimes get lost and can get beat by bigger wings more often than a guy like Deuce McBride can. So I think Deuce McBride is clearly a better defender, but I do think Donte is a good defender as well. I am expecting a defensive leap from Deuce McBride, actually. So I think he's going to be even better in terms of perimeter lockdown. I think that if we get, if the Knicks get a matchup back with the Indiana Pacers, I don't think we're going to see TJ McConnell roast Deuce McBride this playoff season. So any last thoughts on Deuce McBride before we kind of talk about any concerns moving forward from you, Shaun, by the way, because you haven't got I know you're a big Deuce fan, so I want to give you a chance to hype him up if you want.
I don't know which agenda I'm pushing. I got to wait until I see what the starting lineup is, but either 6th man of the year or most improved. If he comes off the bench, he's 6th man of the year. If he starts, he's most improved. And I really can't wait and I'm glad to hear, like I said, you guys are the smart people. So I love hearing the smart people agree with me and tell me why I think what I think. And I just can't wait. You guys have, I think I said it on here last year. You guys have the numbers and and every single stat up. For me, it just comes down to how do I feel when you're about to shoot the ball? When it gets kicked out to you, do I feel good or do I feel not good? And with Deuce, I feel good. Even when he wasn't, like Shwin said, the part of being a good shooter is shooting through not making. So it's even when he was struggling, I'd be put that shit up. And so, I believe that now this year, especially with the way his confidence shot up last year, coming into a season with an expectation, even now with Donte being out the way even more so, it's just whether he starts or not, he's a very key player on this team. He's a very key role on this team, and he doesn't have to look over his shoulder. And I'm very excited about that. And on top of that, you guys said a couple of times about not having, the secondary creator off the bench. I know it's early, and I try not to do this, man, but I really like Tyler Kolek. I really do. And I really think that he's going to give us some, if nothing else, he looks ready to run an offense off the bench when Jalen's not on the court. And I'm very excited about that. This
just means, Shaun, that the first time the Knicks lose in November when Cam Payne's playing and Tyler Kolek's getting DNPs, your post-game show will be must watch YouTube TV.
Yes, sir.
I'm not going to lie. We won't even make it to November. If Cam Payne is playing in opening night while Tyler Kolek is getting a DNP, I'm going to be pissed. We did not bring Cam Payne here for me to have to watch him be part of the rotation with nobody injured.
I definitely concur on that. I also will say, maybe this is surprising to other people, but I go by that same kind of heuristic you just mentioned, Shaun, about if it gets kicked out to the player, how do I feel about them taking the shot? I think about that a lot because in the season when Julius Randle shot 40% from 3, it was game 78 and it gets kicked out to Julius Randle, and I still didn't feel good about it, despite his 40% shooting percentage. I just didn't believe it. And that's based on, I think we can buy into some things when it's based on like this huge body of evidence that we just observe day in and day out, years of a guy's career. And then we're seeing something that doesn't match up right with it. I think there's total validity to like feeling like, I don't really believe this. But I think with Deuce McBride, I definitely agree. I think we believe in the shooting, despite him having lower percentage shooting seasons, his first couple of years. I think it's definitely legit, and I think we have a lot to look forward to with him probably getting 20 to 25 minutes a game at the very least.
And I hope he gets that volume. I think that was the difference for Donte. It's like Donte's a great shooter, but it really became, okay, hey, everybody's hurt. You shoot 40% or close to it. Take as many as possible. Go take 16. You're bound. Go take 15. You're bound to hit like 5 or 6. Like
it's a great point. But the thing is, and one thing I do love about Donte that I want to see from Deuce as well. It's hard to get guys to do it. Look at Josh Hart. You could tell Josh Hart as much as you want. Keep shooting. We need you to shoot. Be aggressive. And he may not do it. But a guy like DiVincenzo is like completely unconscious. He's putting it up 11 times per 75 possessions. He does not care. He's going to keep shooting the ball. And that's a skill. That's a skill in my opinion. So,
and it also, like so much of basketball is what you intuitively aren't watching. And when a guy like DiVincenzo is that unconscious and that willing to shoot whenever, it has a domino effect on the defense, the possessions he's not shooting, because they realize that if they give him an inch, he's going to shoot. They won't give him an inch. And all of a sudden, there are 5 possessions you can look at where he doesn't touch the ball, but maybe Jalen Brunson gets a slightly better look in the mid-range because DiVincenzo's defender can't stunt the way he would if it were Josh Hart. And so it's just it's why basketball is such a great game, because you can put DiVincenzo and Josh Hart in the exact same spot. And maybe even you could say that Josh Hart's shooting 40% from 3 this year. Like maybe he'll just have a hot month or a hot couple months. But until Josh Hart he doesn't even have to be as willing as DiVincenzo, but until Hart is more willing to shoot when he's open, he's not going to be able to positively affect his teammates in those possessions when he's not shooting the way a guy like DiVincenzo does. And that adds up over the 82 game sample in terms of overall impact.
And really quickly,
go ahead.
My bad. I'm sorry.
No, you're
really
good.
Quickly, just as a point to what Geoff just said, I forgot what I was looking for. Like I searched like a keyword and I was just looking for something in my old tweets. And I came across this clip from the We Here season. And RJ drives to the basket, and Kyle Lowry's been on so many teams in the past couple years. I can't remember what team it was. I think it was still Toronto, but whatever team it was, RJ drives to the basket, and his man is on him, and Kyle Lowry is helping so hard from one pass away. And I'm just like, I can't wait till next year when this number 6 in the corner is off my team, so people can't do that. Like this guy, Kyle Lowry is one pass away, standing in the paint on the drive. I'm just like, this is insane.
Yeah.
So,
bro, I hate that. I hate seeing that. That's like my biggest pet peeve is when a guy is able to help one pass away. He's just standing in the paint, and it's like, no, we this is 2024, 2025 basketball. That can't be possible. So I totally agree with that. All right, we talked about a lot of positive things where, it's very cheery. Everybody's happy and laughing. What are the biggest potential concerns for the Knicks going into the season? I know for me what it is. I'm really curious from you guys. Shwin, put a damper on our fun party, if you will. What's your biggest concern?
I would just say honestly, it's just the health.
That's mine too.
That's it. Like I'm not worried about the talent of this team. I'm not worried about what they look like when they have a full deck. I'm worried about the health. Obviously, OG is an injury concern. We all know that. Mitch Robinson is he's out indefinitely. They're saying December, January. It's a pretty broad fucking timeline. So I don't know. It's 2 months. Hopefully Christmas treats him well. But that's it. Like I'm not worried about anything else. I'm not worried about them scoring. I guess if you want me to not take the cop out, I would say like the defense when Cat is at the 5, like how can they match when Brunson and Cat are on the floor and Cat's at the 5, how do they match up defensively against the best teams in the NBA? How do they mitigate those guys' weaknesses? How do they hide all that stuff? That would probably be the biggest basketball concern. And I would say like the reason why I don't worry too much about that is the offense is going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. Like it's going to be great. And as great as Boston's 5-out look is, I'm sorry, Jalen Brunson is a better offensive player than anybody on Boston. He is a better offensive player than anybody on Boston. It's not close. And you give him a 5-out look, he's going to go nuts. I mean, you look at his numbers in Dallas when he had 5-out, and that was with like a version of Porzingis who is not what he is now, who is still recovering from all his injuries. He was elite. If you look at the very, very rare times the Knicks have gone 5-out, or at least not have a traditional big man on the floor in New York, his numbers have been great. I mean, you go back to the end of that Miami game in Game 6, like Tibbs finally was like, all right, I just got to throw the kitchen sink at it for like a minute and 47 seconds, and Miami couldn't stop him. He could not stop him. So if you just think about that, and now you think about getting Karl-Anthony Towns, who is the best or second best big man shooter in the league, like you're talking about
shooter of all time.
Well, he definitely is. If you ask Karl-Anthony Towns, don't worry about that. He'll tell you on a podcast. But yeah, like it's a totally. I mean, good luck. Just good luck to defending Jalen Brunson on those looks, because he is going to be a problem. As are Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby and all these guys. They're going to feast when the basket is that wide open, when the Red Sea has parted, so to speak. But yeah, so I guess the defense, but really it's just the health for me.
Yeah, Shaun, what are you thinking as far as any concerns? I mean, health is my big one too. I think it's the only thing that could really make this team not be, a top 3 team in the East. But what are you thinking?
I mean, you guys have both said health already, and that's definitely my answer. So I'm going to pivot and try to find something on the fly to complain about, which is not really my strong suit anymore. Let's see. We got to stay healthy. And I think chemistry is not an issue at all. I guess depth, like genuine depth, like you've got, at this point, we've got Tyler, Deuce, or Josh, whichever one of the two, and Precious off the bench. And so it's like, do we bring Marcus Morris back? Like, are we going to go 9? Who's going to be that 9th person? Like, who makes it so, like, our rotation? Like, one thing I really love about last season, and honestly every minute of Knicks basketball since Evan Fournier left the rotation, I love being able to enjoy all 48 minutes. I don't want anybody out there that I don't want to see out there. Like, I hate when somebody makes me not like seeing them on the court for my team, like, especially when they start at point guard. So, but yeah, no. So, I mean, I just want to see who that, like, final piece of the rotation is going to be that makes me say, okay, cool. I don't want to be, we have a good rotation, but, like, like, who's the final rotation piece that makes it a solid all the way through 9-man rotation?
Shaun, there are a few episodes of your post-game show that I swear to God I still will watch just to make myself laugh. Number one will forever be when they lost to Miami in the We Here season in March. You have the funniest opening monologue in the history of the world about Elfrid Payton. You're like, what? Why are you setting flare? Nobody cares that you're setting flare screens. Just leave the arena. You tried so hard with Evan Fournier. Like you, when they signed Fournier, you were like, all right, this number doesn't seem good, but I'm with it. I'm going to root for him. And you made it like 3 weeks. You were calling for Grimes. To replace him in the rotation like 3 weeks into the season. There's this one post game against the Bucks where you're like, get Fournier out of here. I want Grimes. I love it. I love
That's so funny. I vividly remember that post game, and I always want to find the clips, but I guess I could just go back. Thank you for telling me what game it was.
It's against
because
the Bucks, yeah.
I was working a production job, so I was in a hotel. So I'm like doing the show in a hotel, and I'm just like, yo, Evan Fournier came into this game over his last 8 games shooting 25% from 3, and somehow his 3-point percentage went down today. Like, and all you do is shoot. Like, I was so fed up, bro. I clipped it, and I remember I think it was Nikias, on their podcast, whatever. They saw the clip, and I remember them being like, I didn't know we could talk about players like this, but this is pretty cool. Like, I was letting Evan Fournier have it that day.
So your point about the depth, really good one. I completely agree with you. Actually, I just went on a pod on Knicks Film School before the trade and talked about how the Knicks have a top bench in the league. I think they went from top bench in the league to we're a little bit worried. We got, like you said, we got to see who can bring what to the table. And to your point, it does depend on who Tibbs starts. Again, I think that's part of the reason you start Deuce, because they're so light on the wing. It's just easier to get Hart in for Bridges and OG if he comes off the bench. I think that rotation's easier with Hart off the bench. I'm gonna spin my concern back to you, Shaun, and to you, Shwin, because I think it's interesting. It's something XJ and I have talked about, and I think it's something that not a lot of people really consider. So I think everyone and their mother would agree that in a complete vacuum, Mikal Bridges is an upgrade from Donte DiVincenzo, and Karl-Anthony Towns is an upgrade from Isaiah Hartenstein. They're better basketball players. The Knicks got better as a basketball team in their starting lineup. But I think what people aren't considering is that Mikal Bridges and Karl-Anthony Towns, for the Knicks to improve the way that Knicks fans want the team to improve, Mikal Bridges and Karl-Anthony Towns aren't replacing DiVincenzo and Hartenstein in a vacuum. They're replacing these two guys who were incredibly impactful last season. So Bridges doesn't have to be better than DiVincenzo. He has to be better than DiVincenzo was last season. And Karl-Anthony Towns doesn't have to be better than Hartenstein going forward. He has to be better than Hartenstein was last season. And all the impact metrics love these guys. I think my primary concern is that the upgrade from going from DiVincenzo to Bridges and of going from Hartenstein to Towns may not be as big as people are expecting. And what the Knicks are left with is a way worse bench, to go along with Shaun's point. And maybe they might just end up being the same team they were last season on the whole, because you're only getting a small upgrade in going from DiVincenzo to Bridges, 2024 DiVincenzo to be specific, and 2024 Hartenstein to go going from that to Towns to be specific. I don't know if that's a concern to you guys at all. If you just think if you think that, OG Anunoby, if he's healthy, we're getting more of him and that's going to make up for it. Are you just way more confident in this group of guys than you were in last year's guys? Or does that resonate with you at all? Let's start with Shwin.
Well, I would say this. I think the version of the team that we saw before Julius Randle was sabotaged by Jaime Jaquez Jr. I thought that was a contender. I vividly remember watching that game, and before that happened, I was maybe a little stoned, but I was like, this is the best. I'm like, they're a contender. This is just a contender now. I'm 100% in, and it's unfortunate we never got to see that version of the team. We never got to see them fully healthy, because I do 100% think they were equipped to beat Boston. Boston would have been the favorite, but I think they would have definitely given them a run for their money, especially given Porzingis was out, right? I think that would have been a really great shot for the Knicks to win a championship. And I think we were way better than Dallas too. So yeah, I would say if they're ultimately that, then we're a contender and we're fine. So that wouldn't concern me. I would be like, okay, so we're just a championship contender, which is what I expect us to be. But I think this is what needs to be said is the second that Isaiah Hartenstein left, you had to find a different way to get to that level. I tweeted it out as soon as he signed in OKC. I thought that as good as the Knicks were, I did not think they had a championship ceiling without Isaiah Hartenstein. Not because I think he's individually so great, but I think he opened up opportunities for them and things that just mattered a lot. And without him, we didn't have that. We did not have we didn't have 5-out spacing with Hartenstein, but you got the little 4.5 spacing just because he's so effective running dribble handoffs on the perimeter and stuff. And that mattered a lot. I know he didn't have a good playoffs, especially defensively. He had a really, really rough playoffs defensively last year. But the fact that you would have had him and Mitch again, presumably at some point, with Randall back, with Mikal, all that stuff, I was like, yeah, that would be a championship contender, no doubt. Once you lose that, that's when we're starting okay, well, I guess the only way to get that championship ceiling again is we've got to experiment with Randall at the 5 and all this type of stuff. And obviously, it seems like the Knicks were not comfortable with that. They did not think that was going to give them championship upside, and they make this trade. And I think that's a reasonable decision to make, because as much as I would have loved to see Julius Randle at the 5 or whatever, it's still not the same in terms of spacing the way Cat is. So, I guess to answer your question, it would not concern me if we're just as good as that January version of the team, because to me, that team was a championship contender and had every opportunity to win one. And it would be a great outcome if the Knicks have a team that now your core pieces are in place, right? Brunson, Bridges, OG, Cat, Josh Hart, Deuce McBride, like those guys are locked in. So if that's what we are, I'm happy. I'm very happy. Let's just get to Boston. Let's see that and see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, and I just want to see, Shaun, do you have anything to add before we kind of just jump to our final thoughts, overall expectations for the season?
I almost hesitate to do it, but I don't because it worked last year, so I'm going to do it again. Last year I said Jalen Brunson would be top 5 in MVP voting before the season started. Lo and behold, top 5 in MVP. I said Knicks would be a top 3 seed, maybe not 3. I said we win 50 games, 2 seed, 50 wins. I got us as a number 1 seed with health. I got us as number 1. I think that the level that Jalen's going to be playing at, I really believe. I'm bought into this whole Karl Towns thing. I love the wings with OG and Mikal, and I just think that there's this heavy understanding that, and you can say this for every team. I'm sure all teams feel this way in the locker room, but we're just on a mission, and we don't take the regular season off like some teams do. I think we're going to be on a mission for 82 games, and I love what Jalen said, and of course it's what you expect him to say. He's just we want to build on last year, but we can't get back to game 7 of round 2. We have to start from the beginning. And so I believe that that's how they're going to approach the season. And if they play the way that I believe they're capable of playing, and I think Boston, they're great and they're a good team and all that, but I just think that we're better. And so I got us as the number 1 seed, and I got Jalen Brunson winning MVP. And I got them finally. You know what I think Leon did all this for? Because I think the iteration of the team we had would have been fine. I think we could have gone. I thought we were a number 1 seed already. So I think the iteration of the team we had would have been fine. I think Leon Rose is sick and tired of being robbed for Executive of the Year. So he's like, I'm going to do a lot of flashy shit. So you guys have no choice. Because I feel like he's deserved Executive of the Year the last 2 seasons and didn't get it. So now, the Josh Hart pickup isn't as sexy to people maybe. Isaiah Hartenstein on 2 years, $16 million maybe isn't sexy to people. But, now, okay, I traded for the shiny object. So give me the award.
That's a big projection that you have there, but I definitely don't think it's impossible. I think the only thing I'd be concerned about with that projection is really again, I mean, we talked about health, but I also think a guy like OG Anunoby, I think personally, if I was to say my potential concern kind of segue into the overall expectations, is that there's so much pressure on OG Anunoby. OG Anunoby makes everything work. He makes Towns at the 5 with a pure 5 out, not a bad defense. I think they could still be a top 10 to 15 defense with Towns at the 5 if OG Anunoby is out there. He makes every lineup work. And that's a lot of pressure on a guy who I know that people have said his injuries have been freak injuries or whatever, and don't really necessarily predict that he's going to have injuries in the future, but he keeps having injuries. So I'm still not sure about that. So we'll see. But I think if OG stays healthy, literally anything's in play. So yeah, Shwin, your overall kind of expectations, any projections you have?
I had to look up this Moose tweet that Geoff,
it's hilarious.
he just said I have something to get off my chest. Now that Randall is gone, and then in all caps, I've been lying on this man's name all summer. I never had faith in him. I'm sorry. It was all a lie. Every good thing I said about him, I was lying. It was a really good tweet. It was funny. I somewhat agree with that.
You gotta respect a guy who's willing to admit that he's just a homer, because on some level we're all homers, and somebody who will. That's what I've always loved about Shaun's show is he gets on there, he brings good analysis, but he'll be the first to tell you I'm a Knicks fan, and that's what I'm doing here, so sometimes I'm gonna get it wrong, and I think somebody who's real like that, just there's a genuine there's something to a genuineness like that I appreciate.
Yeah.
There were some things I said about Karl Towns 3 days ago I'll never say again.
Yeah, look, cards on the table. I've never been a huge Cat fan. I do I've always understood the appeal. I understand what he brings to the table. It's the defense, and look, he's also just he's a corny dude. I'm sorry. Like, he's just corny. But he is, I think if he's ever going to succeed, this is the environment for him to succeed. That said, what are my expectations for this year? Look, I think cards on the table, I would say even at full strength this year against Boston at full strength this year, I don't think we have quite enough. I think we still need to address our depth is not important, but I do think having more than Deuce and Hart and Precious off the bench, a little bit more versatility, a little bit more guys that can attack is key. Something to keep an eye on. How do Tyler Kolek and Pacome Dadier look when they get opportunities? But they both will get opportunities this season because we will have injuries. Dadier to me is really, really interesting. Not so much this year because, look, if he came in and was all of a sudden like a high-quality rotation player as a 19-year-old rookie or whatever, I'd be like, wow, the Knicks in the 25th pick, huh? Something special there. But he's kind of like, as you have depleted your depth, now his development is pretty key for the organization. I like unironically in our Discord, I was like, I think the Knicks like biggest organizational priority now after all these trades, as far as like internal stuff, is just everything should just be like, we are putting every resource we have into Pacome Dadier. Because a player with his size and kind of athleticism, theoretical skill set would add so much to this team, to this roster. So that's separate from this. Expectation, yeah, like I think Eastern Conference Finals. I think if we get an Eastern Conference Finals, I wouldn't call that season a success, but I would see that as we're right there. We're very, very close to overtaking Boston. And given some of the financial constraints they will be dealing with in the future, it might, I don't know how long their current group will be together. All the rumors about their ownership situation and all that stuff is interesting to monitor. But yeah, like the Knicks are in a really good spot. So Eastern Conference Finals, push for the Atlantic Division. I don't know. I still think Boston might end up being healthier on the aggregate than us. So that'll be a weird one. And my expectation is OG Anunoby does not average more than 32 minutes per game. That's very key to me. I think he has to have his minutes maintained. Has to be a priority for him, more so than anybody else on this team. I like, if you told me Jalen Brunson averaged 35 minutes, I'd be like, that's fine. You know, Cat averages 33, 34 minutes. I'd be like, cool, whatever. OG Anunoby should not average more than 32 minutes per game. I know it's like an arbitrary cutoff, but I think saying, okay, you're going to play 2/3 of all games you're available is a very reasonable ask, and one that should be imperative if the goal is to win a championship, because we want OG Anunoby good to go and healthy and firing come playoff time, not, you know, in January or whatever. And for OG, hopefully he can avoid having like some weird injury. Like this guy just had a weird elbow thing last year. He had one when he was at the Raptors where he was like, he cut his finger doing like doing chores at home or something. It's like, what is going on with this guy? So for the organization, manage his minutes for OG Anunoby. Just please, you sign a $212.5 million contract. Just pay people to do everything for you, please. Trickle down economics, make it happen.
I agree.
I don't think people realize, like, I mean, Knicks fans I think do, but the way OG's contract is talked about, like, I wish people would talk more about, oh, he's an injury risk, and not, oh, it's a role player making that much money. Like, when OG Anunoby's healthy, he's legitimately one of the 30 most impactful players in the NBA. The contract's fine if he's healthy. It's just, to Shwin's point, can he stay healthy? I'm right there with you guys. I don't even really have anything to add. I think Eastern Conference Final, they can win a championship if things roll right. I think if they lost to – if something weird happened in the regular season where they had to face Boston in the second round and they lost to Boston in the second round, I wouldn't begrudge them for losing in the second round.
Unless I get wiped out.
Philly's a weird thing. Like if all the chips roll well for Philly and they lost to Philly in the second round, I wouldn't begrudge them for losing to Philly. Like if George is still awesome and healthy, if Maxey takes a leap and Embiid is peaking in the playoffs, if all those things go right for them and they're just this really good team and the Knicks lose a tough series to them, wouldn't begrudge the Knicks for losing in the second round to them. I think any other loss in the playoffs would be a disappointment if it comes before the Eastern Conference Finals. I think that's where they're at for this team. Do you have anything to add to that, Extra?
Actually, you took my point exactly, which was that to me, it's not really how far they go, but it's who they lose to if they lose in the playoffs. So I think it's acceptable for them to lose to Boston in a competitive series. To lose to a fully healthy Philly is going to be tough regardless. So a fully healthy Philly in a competitive series, to OKC in the finals, and maybe to like Denver in the finals. Any other loss outside of that, I think, is a disappointing season. And so that's really where my expectations are. There's 4 teams that they can lose to, and they'll beat everyone else, I think, moving forward. That's my general projection on the Knicks.
I have a quick last question for the three of you that actually doesn't know I'm going to ask. Real quick, yes or no? Is Mitchell Robinson on the Knicks when the playoffs start next season?
Who's going first?
Shwin, lead us off.
Yes.
Shaun?
I'm going to say yes.
Actually, what do you think?
I'm going to say yes. Yeah.
I think yes, purely because he's not playing until December, January, whatever. He has so no team is going to be like, we're going to give you something awesome for Mitchell Robinson right now, especially because last time, like, he's had 2 surgeries since we last saw him play or whatever the hell it is. Teams are going to, it's again the Bill Simmons. Can I see it? Like, they're going to be like, no, we'll wait to see what Mitchell Robinson looks like, and by the time he plays and rounds into form, the trade deadline will be gone. So I think he makes it through the season purely because of like his injury. If he was not injured, I think they would be shopping him aggressively and looking to move off, because I think they would want to split his contract up into like maybe 2 rotation guys. But yeah. By the way, the Nova guys aren't safe. We know that now. We know it now.
I mean, I think the rest of the Nova guys are safe, but
for this
there's
year.
only one Nova guy
for this year.
But I have the same reasoning, the exact same reasoning as you, Shwin. Like, I think that the reason why Mitch is going to be here is because he won't be back. Like, when we were talking about, Geoff and I were talking about, like, would they trade Trey Murphy for Mitchell Robinson or something? It's like, to me, the reason was, or the primary reason why that wouldn't happen is because the Pelicans don't have a center, and if they made this trade, they still wouldn't have a center for a long time. It's like, it doesn't even fill the need that they have for half the season. So it just kind of doesn't make sense for teams to go to make a really great trade for a player they're only going to get for half a season. So yeah, for that reason, I agree.
Yeah, and not only does it not make sense for other teams, but then on that end, it's like the value you're trading him at is much lower because he's not playing until December. And I don't want to trade Mitchell Robinson just to trade Mitchell Robinson. Like,
right. It's almost like the inverse. It's almost like the inverse of what Shwin was talking about earlier with DiVincenzo. Like, we talked about how amazing DiVincenzo was last season, but shooting's kind of, there's volatility to it. For all we know, last season could be the best season of DiVincenzo's career. And, for him on a personal level, I hope that's not the case. I hope he keeps ascending and he does great things for Minnesota. But it's very possible Leon looked at it and was like, this was an outlier level season. This is the most value he's ever going to be worth. And we don't want to extend Julius Randle. So let's package this guy at his peak value with a guy we don't think we're going to extend and get a guy who can be a part of this core for, the next 5+ years.
His value was never going to be higher, DiVincenzo. His contract has 3 years left on it. And and he was like a starter last year who averaged whatever it was, 19.5 points per game as a starter. He wasn't going to be a starter. He's going to play less minutes. Like, he just was not. Even if he maintained the rate production, his value would drop purely because he was not starting. So they cashed on a really peak value.
And even if he improved, he'd be closer to demanding more money. Like, if
getting big money,
if he proves that last year is sustainable and he actually is that level of offensive player. Okay, well, you're going to have to pay him in 2 or 1 years now, as opposed to you get this super bargain for the next 3 years. That's a really great point.
Yeah. DiVincenzo was traded at maximum value. Julius Randle was not traded at maximum value. In my opinion, I think that actually this trade is closer to Karl-Anthony Towns for DiVincenzo and a protected first than it is for Karl-Anthony Towns and Julius Randle, with Donte DiVincenzo thrown in. But that's another conversation for another day. This was a great preview for the season for the New York Knicks. super appreciate you guys coming on every time, both, second time appearances for you both. So we really appreciate your time and your insights. Let our audience know, if they don't already know, which, for the most part, we have a ton of Knicks fan in our audience. They all know both of you and where to find you. But if they don't, where can they find each of you? Shaun, you can start first.
At I Hate Shaun. That's I Hate SHAUN. Shouldn't have to spell either of the first two words for you, but I Hate Shaun. Also twitch.tv/I Hate Shaun. I don't know what I'm doing yet, but I think I'm gonna do shit on Twitch. I have no idea what's going on.
Whatever you do is going to be fire, dude. We know that.
I appreciate that, for real. So yeah, that, and I'm possibleop.com as well. Hoodie's coming out soon, so
Awesome.
Shwin,
and thank you guys for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here, man. Truly,
it's our pleasure for sure. We appreciate you coming on, man. Shwin, where can people find you?
You can follow me at ShwinnyPoo on Twitter. Check out the Strickland. I do pods there. I write, not really, very, 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 very infrequently do I write, but I do write sometimes. So check that out. Aside from that, I got nothing. So thank you for having me on.
We appreciate it, man. Thanks so much. Definitely check out both of these guys. If you haven't already, it's crazy that you're watching this and haven't checked these guys out, but I know you will after this episode. Geoff, any last words? Close us out. Take us home. What's up, man? How are you feeling, Geoff, now after we talked for a while?
I'm feeling great. That was a really good episode. I'm going to say what I said last episode. I'm very proud of that episode. I love all the episodes we do with guests for different reasons. I thought the episode we did with DJ was great. And this was, I sometimes when you have multiple guests on, there's a concern that like balance and, it just seemed like Shwin, Jesus, I blew it at the end. Shaun and Shwin. Yeah,
Shwin is sick,
Shwin. It seemed like they had like really good chemistry, intermingled very well. And I really appreciated you guys coming on. So thanks again for your time.
I like that Geoff has no fourth wall like awareness. It's just like, our last episode was good. This episode's good. These two had good chemistry. It's like, let's just talk about it. It's good. All right. Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. And I thought it was a great preview. We will see you all next time. We have a ton of amazing content coming out, as we will. A lot of really cool stuff in store for this season of Hot Hand Theory. We are very close to 1,000 YouTube subscribers. So if you haven't yet, please subscribe. That'll get us, I appreciate it, Shaun. That'll get us some AdSense, some ad revenue, and we'll be able to do some cool things from that point on. So please subscribe if you haven't. And for Shwin and Shaun and Geoff, I'm XJ, and this has been Hot Hand Theory.